View from a balcony, pulling the blue lawn chairs next to the ice chest. Stuffed 2 grams in the blunt that we just blew. Now I'm getting blown by a bitch who I don't know her name. Cold chain hanging, got a few in the room, but I don't wear them out. Only wear them in the house, cause I shine so bright that I wanna blind you.
Then he moved massive amount of chakra to his eyes so he could locate the seals that had been placed in his room. He saw 5 pieces of paper placed in his different locations in his room. One's the seal on the besides of the door, one on a wooden part of the wood and window frame, one of the floor on the wooden chair, and the finally one of the right beside the pile of paper. He had just finished when he saw this. He just sat there quietly trying to think of some way he could remove all the tags from the room. However, in his little fantasy, he lost track of time, and when he was once again looking at the clock, he saw that it was close to time that he was supposed to meet Jiraiya, so he could calmly got up and walked out of the room. When he did that, he took a left, went into the bathroom. Once he was in there, he let out a sigh and used the Shinshin to get to the house undetected. Jiraiya was a little surprised to see his room fill up with smoke. However, his confusion soon passed as he saw the elderly figure he had come to respect in the middle of it, using the Shinshin to get here. That away, no one knows you're missing. Smart move. Then again, what else would I expect from the very man who trained me? The white-haired toad sage said, looking at the elderly man figure in front of him. Hiruzen smiled when he heard this and looked at the young figure in front of him. The two thought then came to an end when they heard a knock on the door. However, before either one of them could say anything, the masked figure known as thought of Konoha as the copy ninja walked into the room. Yo, what's up? Kakashi asked, looking at the two males. Oh, good. Good to know that you're here. We can officially start, Jiraiya said, looking at the two male figures in front of him. When he said this, the two of them nodded and took a seat opposite of each other, while Jiraiya was in the middle of the side. So what is this Kakashi may or may not know about? Hiruzen asked, looking at his former student. First things first, Hiruzen, how long do you think this has been going on? Jiraiya asked, looking at the elderly man. When he asked this, a great ninja didn't know how to respond and simply shrugged his shoulder before responding. A few years, maybe. When the other ninja too heard this, they sighed and looked at each other. Elderly man, I wish I could tell you that was the case. However, the reality of the situation is not what we could like to believe, Jiraiya said, looking at the male figure to his right. Indeed, as Jiraiya said, this has been going on much longer than just a few years. In fact, this conspiracy has been going on for close to 20 years, Kakashi said, looking at the male figure in front of him. I see. Well, that is some rather alarming news, Hiruzen said, as he put his head down for a moment, trying to process the new information. After he had thought about it, he sighed and looked at two men. Well, what all we do now? Hiruzen asked, looking at the two men. Well, as you know, Danzo has his own version of his Anbu called the Root Agent, Jiraiya said, looking at the elderly man in front of him. Yes, of course, Hiruzen said, looking at the two men. To put it simply, these two agents are not normal. Sure, they seem normal enough, and to extent they are normal years ago. They used to be normal humans that just undergo extreme training, so they were loyal to Donzo. However, as the year passed and so Donzo grew more and more paranoid, he had some of his restoreds start working on a new genjutsu on the doesn't just affect the mind, Jiraiya said, looking at him, to which the elderly man's eyes grew wide with surprise. One that doesn't just affect the mind, however. Is that possible? Hiruzen asked, looking at the two male in front of him. We don't know yet, but we do know that in order to perform that technique, two different people must be present during the genjutsu master and finjutsu master must be the one perform the genjutsu, which this why it is so hard to detect in the first place, Jiraiya said, looking at Hiruzen. I see, so Danzo intends to harm Konoha, Hiruzen asked, looking at the two men. It's hard to tell what his really motives are at the moment. However, I am sure of one thing. He doesn't plan to harm Konoha, or at least not directly. He's not satisfied with one position on the Civil Council, and he wants to be Hokage, Jiraiya said, looking at him. I see. Why would he want to be Hokage? Surely he could obtain the same results that he wants just by taking it with brute force, Hiruzen said, looking at the male in front of him. After some thinking about, I believe I have figured out why he is acting in secret instead of acting on impulse, Kakashi said, looking at the two elderly men in front of him. After the moment of silence, the copycat ninja finally spoke. If he were to take what he wants by brute force, if it would lead to several people feeling, some of the people that leave may end up in other ninjas' village. If this happens, then they will without a doubt thinking that he is planning to do the same thing their village if he was willing to do it to his own, Kakashi said, looking at them. And if they found out this, it would lead to another village or perhaps even a civil village teaming up against Konoha to destroy him. Hiruzen said as he finally understood where Kakashi was going, indeed which let's say to stat would make the past 20 years of planning pointless, Kakashi said, looking at the male figure in front of him. Yes, that makes sense. However, that doesn't make explaining why he wants to become Hokage, Hiruzen said, looking at the two male. That matter has been simply answered, my friend. It's because the Hokage holds all power, Jiraiya said, looking at him. The Hokage can multiply certain factors to work out in his favor. The Hokage is the only one that can take both, making the determinations law as they see fit. However, this is usually looked down upon because the civil council usually add their input, Jiraiya said, looking at him. Yes, however, the Hokage also has the ability to choose who is on the civil council and who is to be rejected too. If Danzo were to become Hokage, both make a determination law as they see fit. However, this is usually looked down upon because the civil council usually add their input, Jiraiya said, looking at him. However, abilities to choose who is in the civil council and who is rejected. If Danzo were to become Hokage, Kakashi said, looking at the elderly figure, waiting for him to see where he is going, he be able to make civil council members that have allies themselves with him, or even where he could make the civil council people that he has replaced under his new genjutsu he has developed, Hiruzen said, looking at him. Exactly. So you can see why at the moment you'll have to stay on your toes, Jiraiya said, looking at his former teacher. Yes, and I appreciate you telling me this, Hiruzen said, looking at them. When he said this, he got up and was about to swing away. However, before he did, Jiraiya looked at him. Hiruzen, before you go, I just want you to know that no matter what you think at the moment, the Civil Council are by no means your friends, Jiraiya said before the old man disappeared from the room. When he left the room, the silver-haired male looked at the Toe Sage. Why did you tell him about Naruto is still alive? The male asked, looking at the white-haired male. As much as it pains me to say this, leaving the village was probably the best thing Naruto could have done, Jiraiya said, looking at Kakashi. Oh, and what is that? Kakashi asked, looking at it. Naruto left the village for a reason. While I'm not sure about the details from what I gathered from this last days, here was the thing I gathered. It was horrible. Now here's a question for you, Kakashi. If every day of his life was half of bad as that day was the earth, would I tell Hiruzen what good would it do Naruto if I told Hiruzen he just sent more men out to bring him back to the village? He brings him back to life that he hates on the earth. Would I want to sentence my godson to what kind of fate? Jiraiya asked, looking at the silver man figure in front of him. A few moments of silence passed. Kakashi sighed in defeat and looked at the male in front of him. You're right. It wouldn't do him any good, Kakashi said, looking at him. The silver hair male then got up and walked towards the door, but before he left, he looked at the male that was still in the room. Then, at least tell me when you think he can handle. After all, he, unlikely most of the village, didn't care for Naruto. He cared a lot more than any else did. So even if you don't tell him now, I believe he still needs to know the truth, Kakashi said as he opened the door and walked out into the streets of Konoha. Left alone to himself, the white-haired male sighed and began to think to himself, I guess it's true, it's nothing else. He doesn't have to learn the truth of nothing else. He doesn't have to learn, but he still deserves to know. I guess I can tell him when the time comes, when he likes me and understands that leaving this place was the best thing he could have done. It's almost kind of sad, really. If he had just had one friend, one person to take some of his weight that he had been carrying around with off his shoulders, he might not have left, Jiraiya thought as he looked at the ceiling. I wonder what he's doing now, Jiraiya asked in his head before he let out a sigh. With Naruto and Fu, the two were standing in the hallway with two books in each hand. Their arms were perfectly extended and the two were staring at feeling just a little sore. Why were they doing this? Because it was a punishment. Fu had a question in class, and seeing as how she was a Jinchuriki and rather hated one in the particular village, she was sent outside. Naruto, being the young boy he is, tired to stand up for his newfound friend, and when he did, he was ordered to stand outside the classroom. Stupid teacher, this doesn't even make any sense. Why is he having us to do this? Naruto asked out loud in silently annoyed tone. It's fine, Naruto. It's because I asked a question that I should have asked. It's my fault. We're in this mess, Fu said looking down on the ground.